we're going to work today more on compression, using stuff that's in Pro Tools instead of all my fancy stuff like I did last week in the mix, and basically stuff that you have inside of Pro Tools. Now, I know that some of you have Pro Tools, had it before the semester started, and you might have actually purchased some additional plugins. Like I think, Huna, I saw on your computer when I was looking at it on screen sharing that you have some waves. I probably have that stuff, so if you have waves, you could use that, but otherwise stick with the Pro Tools plugins. Okay, so what I did with this track, I'm going to just play it, a little bit of it, is I went through and I made my markers, right? And I put my intro, verse 1, part 2, which is sort of a little connecting section between the verses. Verse 2, then there's a little riff, and then there's the bridge, and then the intro repeats, verse 3, part 2, verse 4, and the riff comes back in and it ends. So I've got my markers set up, and then I organized my tracks, and the way I did this, with rhythm section tunes like this, I tend to put my drums and my bass at the top of the page. So I've got drums, crash cymbal, and I put the triangle in with the drums. And then I've got hand percussion. I've got 2 conga tracks. I've got 2 bass tracks, one for the verse and then one for the bridge. And then I've got a bunch of acoustic guitar and mandolin tracks. And there's one thing about this is that there are too many tracks. Like, in other words, they're not all playing at the same time, right? And this is something that you'll see. So in other words, at the beginning here, this acoustic guitar and this acoustic guitar are playing. And then over here, there are 2 other acoustic guitars, but you notice all these green ones, there's plenty of empty space. And right here, there's just these 2 guys playing. And then in the bridge, just these 2 guys, right? And then the intro here, and then the outro, there's, these, and you see that there's space. And the reason I did that was that when I was recording this, I didn't do a performance all the way through. I just did sections. And so I would do one section on one track and then open up another track to do the next section. You could go ahead and consolidate all these tracks and make less, and I'll show you how to do that. But I'm just leaving it the way it is. And then on the bottom in the blue area, I've got all the instruments that are playing the melody. So in other words, I made a boo-boo. Let me fix this. Great. I've got all the instruments that are playing the melody. So that's a mandolin, a slide guitar, and some melody acoustic guitars. And also in the rhythm section area, there's not just acoustic guitars, but there's also a mandolin playing rhythm. And everything is live on this except for the percussion is all loops and programmed stuff. I played the electric bass, I played the acoustic guitar, and I played the mandolin. And that's another reason why I assigned this, is that it's a good representation of mixing live instruments. Now, I've also got my instruments all grouped up. So I've got my drums up here. I made a group there, and then I've got a VCA for the drums so that I could solo the drums very quickly. And then I've got percussion, which is here. And then I've got a VCA for that. And then these pinkish tracks are my bass. And, right? And then all these green tracks are my acoustic guitars. And I've got them all grouped, and I've got a VCA for them. Even though there's a mandolin in there, I'm calling that just rhythm guitars, all right? That's because that's what's playing there. And then at the bottom, I've got all my melody instruments in the blue, these bluish tracks. And then I can solo them. Slide guitar, harmony between acoustic and mandolin. And then I've got them all routed, all these different sections. So in other words, I've got my drums. If you look here, the master output, they're bussed to a drum send or a drum bus. And then that is, those all are these blue tracks here. All my groups are routed here. And let me actually just change the color on these guys. There we go. And then down here, I've got some time-based effects, and I've got one special effect here, which I'm not sure about. I call it a crush, and I've got a sans amp, a saturation knob, which you guys probably don't have this, but this is from this company Softube, Softube. This is a free plugin that they get that I would recommend that you sign up and get. It's very good. It's I'm going to type it in the chat. It's softube.com. And that's called Saturation Knob. I use it all the time. And then I've got a compressor after that. And then I've got just a master fader. Now, I've got the master fader turned down because when I was doing my tests with Pro Tools and Zoom, it was a little bit too hot. So I normally wouldn't have this at -4, but 0.6, but I have it there right now just to get you a better sound out of Zoom. All right. So let's play the whole track as it is now. Just let me know if this is distorting at all. All right, I'm going to stop it there. And just to get a flavor of the tune. Now, it doesn't sound horrible now, right? And the reason for that is that I always kind of mix as I work. So as I'm creating a track, I'm trying to set it so that what I'm hearing is pretty close to the final mix. So that when I exported these stems, it sounds pretty good. It sounds close to being balanced. And remember what I said last week is that getting volumes together is one of the biggest things about mixing. So there are many ways that you can go about a mix. Thank you, Irene. So like you can either start from the ground up, which in a track like this would be the drums and the bass and maybe the couple of rhythm guitars. There's also a school of thought, if you're mixing a pop tune, where you can do that, where you get the drums and the bass and then you build a track up on top of that. But there's also a school of thought where you take the melody and you get the melody sounding great, and then you build the track around the melody, right? So I've known some engineers that do that. I find that to be a little bit harder for me personally to do. So I tend to mix from the bottom up, get the ground, the foundation together. So with that in mind, let's take a listen to let's make these a little bigger.
Hey, Professor.
Yes.
I know you usually record these classes, and Zoom right now says you're not recording, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. I'm recording it on, thank you. I'm going to record it now because I like to have a backup. But I'm recording it on OBS because if I record it to Zoom, it's not in stereo. And I actually, and the reason why you guys don't show up on those YouTube videos typically is that I'm recording it just what my cameras and my screen, my switcher is outputting into Zoom. So that's where you get just me in the corner or just the screen or just me. And you guys, you can hear yourselves, but you can't see yourselves, which I think is good for your personal anonymity online. And I think that that's better. But thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So let's do this. Now, I want to show you another trick. Oh, Pro Tools this way. That you can do with memory locations. So, notice how I've made this really big, right? And I can highlight these and go up here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take all these tracks, right, up to the drums VC. I'm going to select them, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to hide these selected tracks. Now, you see, these are the only tracks here. Okay? Now, why is that helpful? Well, what you can do, you don't have to worry about scrolling up and down. So what you can do is that you can create a memory location that recalls this screen. And this is pretty advanced. So let me show you this, and hopefully I can remember how to do it. So if I go like this, and this will be drums, and it's number 12 because I've got all these other memory locations in here. The time properties, there are no time properties. And our zoom settings, track visibility. Track heights, I guess. So I'm just selecting these general properties. Now, I'm going to show all tracks again. And I'm going to make these bigger. And that was on 12, right? So you could, but my friend Ken, what he typically does, and I do this too, is I'll have my memory locations window open, but I'll have it open on my second screen so that it's not here in the way. But just so I don't have to memorize these numbers. But now if I do decimal point 12, decimal point, see that? It goes right to that memory location, to that screen set. All right, so let's do another one. Let's show all tracks, right? And let's zoom everything back down. And then enter. No time reference. And I'm going to call this all tracks. So if I do decimal point 12, decimal point, we have our drums. Decimal point 13 decimal point, we have all our tracks. And notice how it goes back to the zoom that I set. So this isn't so essential for a track like this. There's not that many tracks. But let's say you've got, when I'm working on a film score, and I've got 110 or 115 tracks I have to navigate through. If I set up a bunch of these, it makes it easier for me to just, when I want to work on the brass, I'll just call up the brass window. And then it's right there all zoomed up for me at a level that I like, and all the other tracks are hidden. And then I can easily just get back to looking at the view of all the tracks just by a couple of key commands. So that's really a cool thing to do with memory locations. But like I said, we're not going to, we don't worry about that here, but I did want to show you that. Okay, so let's get these tracks bigger again. and we're just going to solo the drums. Now, let me just see what comes with Pro Tools. Yeah. Okay, so there's a free VU meter that that we have installed in the college, but I don't have it here online, and I'll have to find a link for that, and I'll ask you to install that. So I won't use that today. What I've done is, if you notice here and we look at our clip gain, I've taken the clip gain of all these tracks down to negative 9.5 dB. And the reason I did that is because if I reverse that now, the key command so what I did was I selected all groups, and so all the tracks are selected. Control Shift, and then the up arrow adds the same amount of clip gain to every track. So I'm back at 0 now. Let me turn down the output of this so it doesn't distort. And if I play this back, and if I turn this back to 0, which is where it should be, you see my gain here with just the drums, it's almost pegging my output meters. So that's bad gain structure, right? You want to have some headroom. So I just played around and I found that minus, and I'm just clicking on these. So I went down a little bit and I played it. It's still too high on the meter here, right? So I'm going to go down. And that's better. So that if that's still a little hot, but I'm going to bring down some of the individual instruments a little bit more, and it will give us a good headroom. We don't want all of these instruments to be too hot going in to our master bus. All right, so let's get back to drums. So the EQ on that is okay. Oh, let me just go to Avid. I'm going to use actually EQ7. I want to add just a little bit more thump in that kick drum. So let me set that back. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this Q way up. And this is my frequency here. And then I'm going to turn the gain up. Right? And then I'm going to sweep until I find where I think there's a little bit more beef in the low end there. Let me start here. See that, how flat that is? There's a little bit more oomph in that. Now, what I'm going to do is I don't want it to be so dramatic, and I want that curve to be a little bit all-encompassing. Right. So this sounds like ba, 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 and the other one sounds like boom, ba, boom. I can hear that difference. I don't know if it's translating out over Zoom. Now, the other thing that you really have to be careful of, and I want you to get into the habit of doing this right at the beginning, is volume matching. So I'm going to bypass this effect, and let's look here at, this is the input and this is the output. So this is the volume coming in, and this is the volume after it's gone through the EQ. So you notice that the volume coming in and the volume going out is the same. If I turn on the EQ, you notice now the volume going out is a little bit more. So you want to take care of that. And I'm going to bring the output down right here until they match. And that's pretty close. It's not exact, but it's really close. Maybe if I add, whoops. Oh, I want, sorry. I can't get minus 1.5. Let's see that. Okay, we'll leave it at minus 1.7 dB. Right, so you notice that there's no volume change, but there's a little bit more oomph. Now, that crash cymbal came in, right? You got to be really careful with things like crash cymbals, bells, cymbal rolls, all these really high-pitched things. They'll cut through a mix so easily. So that's too loud. And I'm going to bring that volume down. But another thing, too, is that let's just solo that. There's like a pitch in there. Don't need that. It sounds great on its own, but we don't need that. And that just adds extra volume in that frequency range that some other instrument is probably going to want to take up. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a high pass filter, and I'm going to do like I'll leave it at 12 dB per octave. And I'll exaggerate this. Right, that's way too much. We bring this back a little bit and just I would even go up to maybe 500. And maybe I will change the slope and make it a little bit more gentle. So I'm going to zero this volume out here, and then you'll be able to tell it a little differently. So here's bypassed. There's that room. Can you hear that pitch in there? Room. Right? They're like a fundamental underneath the crash. So it's like maybe even a subharmonic. And now with the bypassed, you can hardly hear that. So, and then we're going to bring the volume of that down here, maybe down to about minus 12. And now we'll listen to that with the drums. Okay, that's a little bit too soft. Bring it up just a little bit. And now we're going to hear the triangle in a second. So I just turned that down to minus 17. And you can still hear it. And I'm keeping in the back of my mind that I'm going to be checking the crash cymbal as I'm mixing, because it still might be a little bit hot for me, but I'll just have to see it in the context. Now, I'm going to do the same thing with the crash that I did with the crash cymbal, and I'm just going to hit Option, click, drag. All right. So you see what I did? I'm using the same EQ on the crash, on the triangle. And just getting rid of some of that low end, and any kind of low end in that. Now you notice in the drums, I added some low end to get a little beef there. And with the upper instruments, I don't need to have it in the drum kit. So I'm leaving that space there. That sounds pretty good. Let's play around with a little compression on the drums. So I'm going to solo the drum kit. And I'm going to use the BF76, which you should all have. Now, the way that this works, and we're going to work with the other compressor in Pro Tools, is that the more you turn the input up, the more it will compress. So with this type of a compressor that looks like this, and there are many of them, it's based on an 1176, which looks like this. Right, this is what if you were to get one, buy one, the front panel would look like this without the UA, this turquoise teal UA thing. But this is modeled on, this is one of the very first modeling plugins made by this company, Bomb Factory, which is why it's called BF. All right, so you've got your input. And if you think about this like a wristwatch, an analog wristwatch, these guys should be kind of the inverse of each other. So you notice how this is at 30 and, well, if this is 12 o'clock is straight up, this is at this angle and this is at the opposite angle. So if I turn the volume up more to here, I got to turn the output up also, right? Now, right here, you have the amount of ratio. So you've got 4:1, 8:1, 12:1, and 20:1. And then I think it's... there it is. You could push all these in by holding Shift and Control and clicking on one of them. But we're going to leave it at 4:1. And the attack and release is opposite. So 7 is a fast attack and 7 is a fast release. So we're going to have a little bit of an attack. And you can hear that it's sort of compressing way too much. Can you? So I'm going to exaggerate it even more. I'll turn the input up even more. Right, you see how it's taking the energy away from the low end? So what you want to do is turn the input down so you're not driving the compressor so much. I'm playing around with 8:1. I don't like that. Now, you can really change the sound. So let's make this a sharp attack and a long release. Right, so I made, this is the settings. I've got the attack at 7, the release at 7, and I'm really driving it. So if I bring the attack back a little bit, it's letting the kick drum breathe through a little bit more. And you can see how I've changed the tone of the drums. So compression is not only a volume control, it's a tone shaping control. So let's just go back. Just some gentle compression to tame in some of the levels. All right. Let's add our percussion. Okay, so Huna, it's up on Google Classroom. If you want to hand in a rough mix to get some feedback, that you could do that today. I'll get to it by maybe late tomorrow, maybe Wednesday or Thursday. I'll look up until Thursday, but the final assignment is due next Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's up on Google Classroom.
I see.
All right. Yeah, I was very specific, I think. And if I'm not, let me know and I will be more specific. Okay, so how is the volume of the congas when they come in? One, two, three, four. Too soft, too loud, or just right?
I feel like it's close, but to me, it's an issue of blend more than volume.
Yes, it's too loud. First of all, it's sort of for me. I don't know how it's translating over Zoom, but it's almost taking over the drums instead of adding a layer on top. Right. So listen again. So it's too loud. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. And now let's listen to this other. Not as loud. But there are EQ issues on this conga drum. There's like a boom, like a ringing that we have to get rid of. Let me just solo this conga here. I think the EQ on that is good. There's not a lot of boominess. But let's listen to the second conga. See some of these notes, boom, boom, boom. There's like a ring in there. If you really pay attention to it, boom, 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 boom. That this one doesn't have. Like these are a tighter recording. So I'm not going to play around with the EQ on that. Right? Sorry, that was the basement door. Somebody went downstairs. I could hear it in my headphones. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go here to the percussion. I want to put some compression on the congas. So I'm going to do that here in the percussion sub. So I'm going to enter our EQ, our compressor here. Right, so instead of putting compressor on both percussion tracks, conga tracks, I'm just going to have a global compression that does all of the of the congas. Now, we've gone over this before. So we've got our knee, which is how smooth the compression curve is. We've got our attack, which is how long it takes until the compressor engages. We've got our ratio, which is the amount of reduction above the threshold. We've got our release, how long until the threshold lets go. We've got our gain, and we've got our threshold. So the gain is used afterwards to volume match. And we've got our input level and our output level, and we've got our gain reduction. So what you can do with this is try a preset. So let's do a drum compression here. So they've got a knee of 30, and you could see that the arc here is curved as opposed to, see how that arc changes right there? If I turn the knee down to this level, it's a very sharp, and here it's just a little smoother. A ratio of 4.5 to 1, attack of 30 milliseconds, and a release of 12 milliseconds, and then a gain and threshold. So I'm gonna use this, and I'm gonna play around as a basis, and I'm gonna play around with it. Okay, so first of all, the gain is out of control because it's made it louder. So see, I'm listening and I'm matching here, but it's not. I want a little bit more compression, so I'm going to lower the threshold. So I'm going to exaggerate it. Right, so you hear how I've exaggerated that compression. And then I'm going to back the threshold off. Until I can just hear the compression, because I don't want it to go crazy. So I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to listen to that with the drums now. Okay, now, the percussion is too loud still, and I've brought the volume down here. Now, if I take the clip gain and bring it down, that's going to affect the way the compressor works, because the clip gain is the volume that's being fed into the compressor, right? And if we change the volume that's being fed into the compressor, that means that there's less input gain into the compressor, which means that it will not compress the way that we set it up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use our percussion VCA to control the output volume of both of these percussion tracks. And I'm just going to pull that down about 3 or 4 dB. And notice it did the volume here. Actually, you know something? That's incorrect. My fault. If I had, sorry, I have to be careful what I do when I say and do. If I had the compressor inserted here, it would do that. But the compressor is down here in the percussion sub. So I'm just going to bring the volume down here. So that's after the compression. Whoops. Make sure that this is off and bring this down. And that's better. So you understand what I meant by that? I've got the compressor in this sub here. And if I turn the volume down, that's being driven, sent through this insert, it will be less input level, and you'd have to change the threshold. I like the way it's sounding. This output is after the compressor in the chain. So we'll just bring the volume down there. And the only other thing I want to do here for the conga is I want to EQ this one here. So I'm going to just solo this one. Now, a little trick you can do, I'm going to do this on slip mode, and I'm going to grab this much and loop playback, right? So it's Command-Shift-L. And then you'll notice here on your, if you've got the transport open, it's got a little loopy kind of a thing through it. You can also right-click on this and get it there. So now this will just repeat over and over again. And I can get my EQ3. So I'm going to turn this up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm looking for the sound that's bothering me. So you can either exaggerate that to find that sound that's bothering you and then remove it by turning the volume down a little bit on the EQ, or you can turn the volume down on the EQ and do the sweep and listen to where it sounds best. So we'll go over both of those examples. So I'm going to turn the gain up, play it, and I'll sweep. Hear that? On the ba-boom. So what I would do is I would take that down. See that how it goes away? So it's this whole area here. So this is the reverse where I'm sweeping. Bypass. So it's in this area here. So then I back the gain down and I make the Q a little bit nicer, and then you can just pop this up. I don't want to take out. All right, great. So got percussion and we've got drums. So I'm soloing those two. And now we're going to work on the bass. Any question on what I'm doing so far? Is it clear? I did make a little error there when I was explaining about the gain staging. I forgot that I had put the compressor on the sub master as opposed to inserting it in the track. But the concept remains the same. All right. So mixing bass and drums together will take you the rest of your life to get together. It's incredibly difficult. What I want to say is that you want to make sure that you can hear the kick drum and the bass guitar. So right now, as I'm listening to this, you can hear that the bass guitar is covering up, it's masking the kick drum. I can't hear the kick drum anymore, so the groove is gone, the heartbeat is gone. So I'm going to bring the level of the bass down. I'm going to play it. Bring it back up a little. Okay. It's a little loud. I'm going to turn the compression down a little bit here. Because it's grabbing too much of the attack when I'm listening to it with the bass. So I can hear the bass and the kick drum. I might add a little bit more oomph to the kick drum. So now what I'm doing is the kick drum is made up of multiple sounds. There's the big, full thump, but then there's the snap on the of the beater hitting the head. So I'm doing now, and the snap of the beater is usually somewhere around 2K. I added just a little bit more to the low end, but I think that what'll help the kick drum stick out a little bit more is if I try to find the snap of the kick drum in that loop. So now, if I want to A-B this, in other words, compare it, I can turn the green band off right here where it says in with my EQ curve. So there's a little bit more of a snap in that now. I'm going to widen this cue up a little bit and maybe just bring it down just a tad. It's also making the snare drum a little bit louder. Okay, great. So let's go back and listen to the bass. The congas and the drums. You can really hear the kick drum, just that tiny little thing I did. For me, I can really hear the kick drum coming through now. Okay, so now I want to work on the timbre of the bass. I want there to be, it's got a nice snap to it. I think I'm playing it with a pick. I don't remember. So I want to add some EQ to this. And I want to enhance the sound a little bit, and I'm going to compress it. I think I might compress these tracks individually, because this is a different, much different. Yeah, that's a much different sound than this. So I'm going to EQ this a little differently. So I don't want the 1 band, I want the 7 band again. All right, so I've just added some fullness in there. Right? I've just brought up everything in the low end. And what you have to remember is that there's going to be acoustic guitars that are playing low strings. I'm going to give the bass this whole area and the kick drum a little bit of this area, and the kick drum we've added some snap to it. So I'm going to give this bass very thin, clean. Now, okay, so it's nice, it's very clean. What else I can do to add some fullness to this is just to add a little bit of distortion to it. Now, we're going to try it before the EQ and after the EQ. So I just grabbed this and moved it into the second slot so that I'll be able to put a distortion effect before and afterwards. And I'm going to go for that soft tube saturation knob. I'm going to try it neutral. Now what happens if I keep the low? leave it neutral. All right, so that's before. And what if I drag it after the EQ? It's a very subtle difference, but I like it before the EQ because it's giving a little bit more hair to the low end. All right, so I'm going to volume match. I think, yeah, I'm going to bring the volume down here. Now I'm going to leave the volume here because it's saturating that nicely. And I'm going to bring the volume down here. And let's listen to it with the percussion and the drums. And then I'm going to just add a little bit of compression on that. And I'm going to use my getting old. Let's see, compressor. And I'm going to, again, it's not a problem to just gentle. I just want gentle, right? Or fat and just something very light. Okay, so right away the output gain is way too high. Right, so I'm matching these two as close as I can, in and out. But you see all this compression it's doing, right? I'm going to bring the threshold up a little bit so it's not compressing so much. And I'm going to, now I'll mute these three. Right? Weak. Better. Better. Now what's cool with Pro Tools is that if you've got a compressor plugged in, there's another little vertical line here, or vertical meter, which shows you that it's doing gain reduction, right? You can see it's doing the inverse of the level. I'm just going to drop the output of that down a little bit. Okay, so this is sounding pretty good. The next thing I want to do is, but it's sounding very close, is I want to add some reverb. And I'm going to do that globally across all of these tracks on their submasters, right? So we've got our drum sub. And what I did was I've set up I've set up two reverbs. So I've got a medium room. Some of you may have this in your Pro Tools. It's called Studio Reverb. I just did the factory default. I clicked here, medium room. And it sounded good. I left it the way it was. And then I used Deverb. I set up a plate reverb. I called up plate bright, and I brought up the gain, and I brought down the decay. And I may do a little bit more low and high pass cutting. I have to hear what it sounds like. And then I added our mod delay 3. And some of you may have this in your Pro Tools rigs. I added a slap, which I'll show you how I'm going to use that. And then I've got this crushed thingy here that I'm going to play around with, which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to go to my drum sub, and I've already put the plate in here. Let me just mute these. So I'm going to have too much reverb. Then back it down. When you stop it, you can hear the tail. What did you use the saturation knob for again? So I used it on the bass just to add some fatness and a little bit of, add some extra harmonics, like a little bit of an overdrive, right? Let me show you that again, Russell. Yeah, I used it on the bass. But it added a lot of gain, so I had to turn down the volume of the bass here as opposed to clip gain, because I liked the way that it was driving, the volume of this was driving this a certain way. If I turn the volume down here, it would not, this would not affect the sound the same way because there'd be less gain being input into it. So I made up that volume on this end here. Okay. So I don't, you know, what is the context? This should sound like a bunch of people playing in a room, right? Not in a huge, like, not in a Taj Mahal, not in a big orchestra concert or in a church, just a bunch of people hanging around playing in a room, right? Or in a small auditorium. So I've got a medium room, and I like that. And then now on, I have a plate, right? I'm sorry. This is the plate reverb. Jeez. On the drums. But what I have on the percussion, so let's mute these right here. So on the percussion, I've got the medium room. So the medium room is a little bit, there's like a little bit of a ring to it that I don't like. So let's see what this tone does. Oh. Yeah, so I've made it a little brighter. So the bass is still seeming a little bit loud to me. So I'm going to come here and bring it down just a little bit more. Right, so do you see how I make a decision and then I play it back and I'm trying to do some other stuff and then I'm still listening to the relationship between the bass and the drums and I'm making adjustments. So it's this constant, like, clay on a wheel where you're just constantly fine-tuning the parameters to try to make it sound better. And as you're working, what you thought sounded good a few minutes ago doesn't sound good. Yes, I will, Robert. So a sub. So a sub is made up out of an aux track. So that's Command-Shift-N, and you select a stereo aux input, right? And you create that. And it has an input and an output. So I right-click here, and I go to a bus, and then I selected, well, before I name them all, let's say I selected, let's do one that I haven't put anything through yet. Let's say that would come up with like set up here for interface, for your audio interface, or however you've got your studio set up. So what I did was I went to the first free bus, let's say it's 21 and 22, and then I right-click on that and I rename it. And this is, rhythm guitar sub, so I would rename it. I just type that in. And let me set it up to the way it's supposed to be. And the way you send is you go to the send column. Right? And you notice that you send it. Well, I've got the output two ways. So if you're going to an effect, you would use the send column and you would send something to one of your effects. But here I'm going to that aux track. So I've got the rhythm guitar, the output of all these tracks, all these green tracks going to the rhythm guitar output, right? So the way I did that was I clicked on the first one, held the shift key down. Then I clicked on the bottom one. And let me just make sure I've got them all selected. And then I hold down Option and Shift. And then I just go to bus and I select rhythm guitar. And they all go to rhythm guitar, all the ones that are selected. So let me show you that again. Let me make these, the output of these, no output, right? I want to make these all go through the rhythm guitar sub. So it's Option, Shift, hold those down, go to the output, and select rhythm guitar, and it populates them all to the rhythm guitar. And then you hold the Option key down and, whoops, just unselect all those. All right. And then for the reverb, right, I've got these going through AUX inputs as well, but they are, instead of sending the entire output of a track to the reverb, you are going to send a copy of that track, the audio of that track, using a bus or a send to input that reverb. So what do I mean by that? This is our inserts, so that's directly putting something in the signal path. Sends is sending a copy of that audio to another destination. So let's just do this. So I'm going to solo this mandolin. So I want some reverb on that. So I'm going to send it to the plate. So I go here into the send column, click, I go to bus, and I look for plate. And it's going right. You can hear the reverb coming out because it's sending a copy of that audio to the input of this track. Now notice that all of these subs and effects tracks, the S is grayed out. Those are all solo saved, right? And the way you do that is you hold the command key down and you click on the letter S, and that grays it out. That means that when anything that's going through there will always play no matter what else is going on. So in other words, I've soloed this and you can still hear the reverb. If this was not solo saved, you don't hear the reverb because the solo is only on the mandolin track. Okay, great. But I don't want plate on that right now. We're not there yet. So another good thing to do is I've been at this now for about 50 minutes, right? I'm going to just take a break for a couple of minutes and let my ears rest. Obviously, I've got headphones on, so I'm going to just take them off and talk into the microphone for a minute. Right? So every like half an hour, 40 minutes, rest your ears. Stop listening. Get your headphones off. Have a drink of water or tea or coffee or whatever it is, and let your ears rest for a minute because your ears get tired. And it's also about your ear health. You don't want there to be constant sound going into your ears. So right now I'm just taking a little break for a minute and I'm just talking and letting my ears cool out a minute. Yeah, and I'm actually going to turn down the volume of my headphones a little. Any questions on what we've done so far, though? That would be a good time now for me to answer them with this riveting display of mixing a track. No? You guys got it all down?
Well, a lot of these things you kind of have to bump into as you're doing it.
Yes, you got to practice it. And, I'm just showing you the technique. To actually do it is another whole thing. All right. So I want to go on now, and I want to solo my acoustic guitar tracks. So that's the rhythm guitar VCA. And just get a sense of what I've got. Okay, let's move ahead because so I've got two parts there. Oh. So there's in the verse part 2. Right, so two things to notice. That right here, these, you know, you have this. They're kind of tame. They got a nice groove to them, a nice feel. They interlock well. But it's a kind of a feel. And then when we get to this section here, whoops. We've got this mandolin, which is very high pitched. And we've got this acoustic guitar here, which is also higher pitched. Playing the Steve Cropper sixths fills. And that's fit over this. So there's some volume work that has to be done there to clean that up, and there also has to be some panning work. So I'm going to make some executive decisions here. And I'm going to just do some basic things before I bring the drums in. So I'm going to take this first track, and I'm going to pan that a little bit to the left. Not all the way to the left. I've gone up 38 to the left, and I'm going to do the same here. Now, obviously, you're listening on Zoom, which is mono. And I'm going to bring the volume of this one down. What I want is, I don't want to touch the volume on this one. I don't want to bring this one up. I'm going to bring this one down because it's too loud. Just a little bit, so I can hear the two of those as an ensemble.
Oh, we can't see the screen, by the way.
Sorry, thank you. Oh, I'm an idiot. Shoot me.
It's all right.
Thank you for telling me. All right, so let's do this again. So, somebody's got, thank you. Right, so I panned this one a little bit to the left, and this one a little bit to the right here. And then I brought the volume of this first one down. Just 1 dB about. And then when these two guys are playing, you can hear both of them, right? When they're panned in the middle. Now, you guys are listening in Zoom, which is in mono. But if I make them the same volume, you can still hear them, but when they're in mono like that, it really gets very cluttered. And that's one great thing about stereo, is that you can declutterize things. So let me get this back over to 38, well, 49 maybe. And I may readjust these, but I want these to be, you know, on equidistant from the center. And I had this down just 1 dB. Okay, so the mandolin is playing the same part as this, an octave higher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, let's see, the mandolin, and I'm going to move, let's see, where is that? Okay, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it up by this guitar here, so that I see that these two guys are related to each other. So I'm going to pan this over to the left, and I'm going to bring the level of that down. So that they become complementary and not fighting each other. So in other words, if I bring this way down, start to raise the volume, so that you can hear the both of them together. And what happens is that this guitar that I've panned to the left, let me actually do this, move this here. This one ends, and then the mandolin comes in and takes over what's happening on the left. Now, we're going to do something a little fancy here. We could, right here in this section here, I like the volume of this. I could turn this up just a little bit more. But you could see that the guitar here, this acoustic guitar and this mandolin, they're fighting that melody guitar for volume. So I'm going to change the volume in that section, and I'll show you two ways to do it. So I've highlighted this area here, and I'll do Command E, and that separates that area out. And I'm going to bring the clip-based gain down a little bit more there. So, excuse me. So I'm going to bring it down 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 dB. And then here, right? So we're going to start here. That area there, we want to bring the volume down. So I could separate that out and do clip-based gain, but let's do this. Let's go to volume, right? This is the track view, volume. And I've got that selected. I'm going to go to the trimmer and just drag and bring that down 4 dB. Okay, so it's too much, so let me bring it up a little bit more. So there's a hierarchy right here. We've got 3 instruments playing like a compartment, like something that fits together. You've got a rhythm guitar that's on the left. You've got a rhythm mandolin that's on the right, and then you've got those sixths being played in the center of the soundstage. So that is a unit, and the hierarchy should be the melody. You hear the melody, and you hear the support. The support should be loud enough to be heard, but not so loud that it gets in the way of the melody. So you see that after I brought it down, I went back and I started readjusting it to come out with a closer approximation. All right, so we've got this area here. Okay, so this guitar looks like it's playing the same thing as this guitar, right? You could see that the waveforms look similar on these two. So I'm going to pan one left and one right. And I think I'm going to make these wider. They're going to go all the way left and right. Okay, great. So let's listen to this with the and put this back to waveform. And let's bring our drums, our percussion, and our bass in. And let's take a listen to what we've got so far. Hit return. So I could tell right now that the guitar is a little muddy. Okay, anybody want to venture a guess? Is the acoustic guitar, rhythm guitars, all that stuff, the green, do you think it's too soft, just right, or too loud? And I have my opinions, but anybody else want to venture a guess?
I think it's a bit loud.
Correct. It's like
Yeah.
it's right on that edge between being too loud and being just right. So I'm going to go right here, right? And we've got our VCA, and I'm just going to play it, and I'm going to adjust the VCA, and that will adjust the volume on all these guitars all at once. All right? So I brought it down -4, which I think is going to be too much, but let's listen. So -2.7. That feels pretty good to me. Right? I can hear the bass. I can hear every instrument on the drums, and I can hear both of those guitars. And they fit in together, and there's no reverb or EQ or compression on the guitars yet. I want to listen to the next section. This sounds good, feels good to me. It's interesting how this little guy here is too loud. Sounded good as an ensemble, but then once you add the drums and the bass, this stuck out. All right, so we're not going to get through this whole mix today. So what I want to do is we're going to work up right up to the bridge. Take me to the bridge. Anybody seen that confounded bridge? All right, so let's do this. I need to EQ the guitars a little bit. And I'm going to do it with the track playing. So I'm going to get our EQ7. So the first thing I'm going to do is that the EQ7 has a high pass filter right here. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to do a 12 dec. Let's leave it at 6, and I'm just going to bring that up. Right, you could see that that's way too much. That's way too much. That gets rid of some of the mud. Now, what I want to do also is I want to make it just a little bit sparklier. So that's usually around, with guitars, around 4K. And bypass. And add some high pass in here as well. See, right here, listen to this. Like that rhythm right there, without the EQ, it's very nasally. It's like, eh, eh, eh. And now it's cleaner. So I'm just going to take off on this track some of the low end. Now, let's add our mandolin. Whoops. And we're going to make this much brighter. And we may have to go back and readjust the volumes after we do this. So I'm going to get rid of a lot of the low end on the mandolin. Right, so I'm actually going to leave it just like that. I got rid of that low end, and it's brightened the whole thing up. Let's listen to this guy here. Well, let's listen to the mandolin and this acoustic guitar at this point. So I don't know if you're able to translate this out over Zoom, but right now that is so much better than the raw recording, right? It just sort of, everything sort of fits in complementing each other. They're not fighting. And just a lot of that is to do to getting rid of some of the low end. And we got our melody here. Excuse me. All right, so I might not really want to EQ this one too much. What I might want to do with this one is add the saturation knob. Give me 1 second here. You didn't hear the coughing, I hope. It's very dry and speaking a lot. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding some saturation just to make it sound a little fatter, right? Because it's a little thin. It's a small guitar. It's a Martin 0001, so it's a very small guitar. It doesn't have a big sound. It's great for playing rhythm, but it's not a good lead acoustic guitar. And then now it's too loud, so I'm going to bring the volume down here. And that automatically, that just fits in so much better. All right, so let's continue on with adding some reverb to these guitars. Now, I could add individual reverb to all these guitars, and that's possible. Or I could just globally add reverb right here at the rhythm guitar sub, and just let's try. I'm going to try the plate and hear what that sounds like with the guitars. Nope, I don't like the way the plate sounds, so let's do this. Let's try the medium room. I like that better. Right, it's not, it just fits better. So you just, for this type of a song, you just want enough reverb that you know it's there, but not so much that it overtakes the track. Right, you can hear that this takes over the track. So I'm going to back it down. All right, so it's muted, it's in. You can hear out the difference. So that's good. The only thing that I want to try is I've got this tape slap, and I want to hear what it sounds like with that on this guitar here. You hear that? It's da-din. Now with this EQ here, I'm thinking that these guys are a little bit too loud now. So just bring this down 1 dB here. And notice that when I open up the track view, the volume is amber. That means that there's automation on it. So in other words, here, the volume is not amber because there's no automation on it. So I'm just going to go here and just click and drag this down just a little bit. Much better. So you see, when you get your mix close, 1 or 2 decibel adjustments are huge. Okay, so let's take a listen. So now I'm just going to mute the melody and play this track. I'm bringing that guitar up just a little bit, tiny bit. This is still too loud. Triangle's too loud. All right, let's get that melody in, which is in the mandolin here. I like that. I think it needs to be a little bit fatter. It's a little bit, it sounds like a mandolin, but I want to make it a little bit fatter. So there's one of 2 ways to do that. I can use some EQ. See how I've made it really thin? So I go the opposite. Just add a little bit of beef to that. And just a little bit less. And maybe add some of that high end. So that's one way you can do it. And you could also use the saturation knob. So what I want to do with this is, again, I'm going to put this through that room. Add some reverb. And also some tape slap. Now, one other thing I might want to do with the rhythm guitars, let me just solo those. What I'm going to do with the rhythm guitars is I'm going to put over the entire sub, I'm going to put a very light compression. And I'm going to use our, right? So I've got like a medium attack and release. So it's just, I can see that it's just touching here, just evening things out just very slightly. It's almost imperceptible. Let me make it more perceptible. Right. That's killing it. Right. See, that's killing it. Just gain matching. And I'm going to use the same compression on that mandolin. I just dragged it up there. Oh, it's mono. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the volume of the melody stays the same between the different sections, right? So when it passes off from this mandolin, right? So the mandolin is too loud because it's overtaking the right, you see what I mean? When you go from the first section to the next section, the melody should be at the same volume relative to each other. So what you could do is you could solo this, and you could solo this, and you could... And I think that this very first one, let me go to slip mode, is a little bit too loud. So I'm going to bring the volume of just this one guy down. And the same here. It's sort of getting in the way of the end of the note on the mandolin. All right, so I've been mixing for about an hour and a half now. My ears are starting to get a little fried at this point. So what you do is you save this as, you stop, you know, you've taken a break in the middle. You stop and you save as, you know, with the date, like using our naming convention, but you version 1, you save as, and then you've got a diary of what you did today, and then you could start from there the next time you mix, right? So don't try to mix the whole piece your first time mixing in a day. I might listen to this with fresh ears. I might listen to this with fresh ears tomorrow or the next day I can get to it and decide that some of the things I did here I didn't like. Now, do I mix things in one day? Yes, but I've been mixing as I've been writing so that the final mix is not that much work for me. I try to mix as I write. You guys are getting stems here that have some issues that need to be cleaned out. So in other words, as I was recording this stuff and putting these tracks down, I'd be doing all this EQing and compressing as I'm working, right? So that writing, recording, and mixing all become part of the same event. So that when you get to the end and you have to mix, you're tweaking and fine tuning. You're not making all these big decisions that I've been making now. Any questions on this? Any questions? Yes, Russell.
Yeah, I have a question. And excuse that there's gonna be there's a construction going on.
That's
so
all right. That's fine. Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, on some of my tracks, I've noticed, some of the stems, like they have, there's some that have one pan setting, and some that have 2 pan settings for the left and right channel.
Right, because some of them are mono and some of them are stereo. So let me show you how that works here. So if we look at our drums, it's a stereo track. In other words, you could see that there's a right.
Can you change the screens?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh, jeez. Okay, so look at our drum track here. It's got a stereo. So you could see on the top, there are waveforms, and on the bottom, there are waveforms. Now, if we look at our bass, right, it's only one track. So it's got a center pan, and this has two pans, a left and a right. All right, so the stereo and mono. Now, if I were to split this into mono, then you would see that I've got one track of drums and the second track of drums, which are combined into a stereo track here.
So, like, how would because I was like trying to test the panning around for some of the
Right. So
tracks,
stereo tracks are harder to pan than mono tracks. Yes.
I see.
So what you would do, I'll make some suggestions as to things not to do. So let's take our drums here. I would not pan them both so that they're both 100% in one direction. So with these stereo tracks, you might have one at 0 and the left on 100, or maybe you'll make them not as stereo. You bring them in a little bit so that the stereo is not as wide. It's a little bit more focused. Yeah, it becomes an issue. That's one reason why when we were working with Expand in Audio MIDI 1 and Recording Studio Fundamentals, that I had you do your panning in MIDI, because when you're panning the audio on those instrument tracks, you're actually changing the way the effects come out of the output, and it gets to be a little bit unnatural. So yeah, so you wouldn't make hard panning, you'd make more gentle panning. So in other words, that would sound more right than left, but not like that. I would rarely do something like that where they were both all the way over. You want to keep some sense of the stereo field, I think. It's a little compromise you'll have to make.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, which piece are you mixing?
The sports piece.
Yeah, that's like the hardest. Yeah. That's the hardest one to mix.
Yeah, it's pretty nice though. I like hearing it.
Yeah, I liked my quarterly checks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, unless there are any other questions, I think we're going to leave it here for today. It's a little short of what our normal time, but like listening like that for me is it really burns my ear out, and I have to go teach another class after this, so I want to rest them for a bit, especially wearing headphones. So with that, I think that was a lot of information, and I hope you guys have a great week. Again, I'll start looking on the first draft folder. I'll start looking as soon as I can, but try to get something in there by Wednesday-ish, and I'll start, because I'll definitely look at it on Thursday. And if there's anything in there tomorrow, I'll have some time, probably not Wednesday, but Thursday I'll certainly have time to look for it. And the earlier I can get to it, the better it'll be for you guys. Mixing is fun.
Thank you.
I love mixing. It's fun. So have fun with it. Hopefully some of these techniques will translate out. Also, don't expect to be perfect your first time mixing something like this. It's not easy. Just keep things simple.